Good morning. 1 year ago, George Floyd was murdered in Minneapolis. His death at the hands of someone who was sworn to protect him put a magnifying glass on the unequal treatment of Black Americans and sparked civil unrest throughout the country, including here in Dayton. Although we had not seen anything like that incident in Dayton, we heard loud and clear that Black Daytonians wanted to reset the relationship between community and police. A year later, we as a community have worked hard to make that a reality. Over 125 diverse community members, police, public defenders, clergy, and elected officials worked together to examine the Dayton Police Department's policies and practices. In the course of 76 working group meetings, 32 listening sessions, and 8 cross-group meetings, they looked at data, listened to experts, and looked for what was working best across the country. Together, they looked under the hood of the police department and found many things that they thought were working well. Where there were gaps or issues, they made recommendations for change. All told, there were 142 recommendations, nearly all of which have been accepted by the Dayton City Commission and are in the process of implementation. Some of these recommendations will bring huge changes in the way we do public safety in the city of Dayton, including the creation of an alternative response model for nonviolent calls, a focus on recruiting a more diverse police force, a new de-escalation policy and training, new prohibitions and reporting requirements about use of force, and a more comprehensive system of police oversight. These recommendations are critical, but I believe that the new dialogues opened up between citizens and their government were equally important. City commissioners, police, most of city leadership got to hear directly from the community about how they want to be policed. This process was not perfect, but I feel confident that the outcomes were driven by the community. Today, we are marking a year of this work and rolling out new transparency tools that will help the public and the media keep track of reform implementation and broader trends in police activity. First, we're going to begin by kicking off a video with a look back at the police reform recommendation process.
They are still policing people that they do not care about.
Yeah, it was a tough press conference, right? We had to do it outside because it was at the beginning of COVID. You know, people's emotions were definitely high. There was a frustration of, I think, some people in the community not feeling they were being listened to by the city. It was probably one of my tougher press conferences that I've had. Well, after the murder of George Floyd, we saw the community really, come to the streets and demand action from our city, our state, and our country. And the following week, we announced that we would do efforts to look at our relationship with the policing community and create these police reform tables, working groups that we called them. Each commissioner took a working group. Mine was recruitment, use of force, community engagement, training, and appeal process, and really went deep with members of the community, over 20 members in each group, focusing on people that are impacted. So Black people were brought to the group or invited to the group first, public defenders, and police to really see, look at our policies in these areas and see what we could do to change, because we thought it was important that the community has a voice and a say in this policy work.
There was a lot of work that went into the police reform recommendation phase. You had to be in the meetings twice a month, but on top of that, the hours that were spent behind the scenes and in between the meetings, you had legislative aides working tirelessly to make sure the group members had everything they needed. You had group members that even took upon themselves to do another 2 meetings a month if they were in the cross-group meetings. There were meetings that were scheduled to do listening sessions, to hear more about best practices, and to air concerns that they had during the process. There was a lot of work done by our group members to do research on best practices themselves. Some of our group members even came up with recommendations after they did research and study for hours. They would call each other offline. They would email each other City staff did a lot of work to make sure everything kept moving and that there were questions raised, and we had to go get those answers. So there was a lot of work put in, and I think it really showed with the number of recommendations that came out.
I was very inspired and encouraged to co-lead this group. We had working group members that represented all facets of our community, and we would have so much collaboration, so much intense discussion. I just felt like regardless of the challenges that we faced, that because we were there working through them together, we were going to succeed.
This process has been different in that it's the most inclusive and comprehensive process that I'm aware of, and I believe all the community members who were involved in the process really walked away with an appreciation for the discussions that took place with the police officers and the wide variety of the panels, as well as the ability to influence policy within the Dayton Police Department.
I didn't find a single person that was regularly coming to our meetings that wasn't there for honest intentions of trying to improve the system. You know, this work never stops. This was one point in time, and a historic point in time, that I think was spurred by a national reaction and outcry to just terrible policing in one place. With the George Floyd incident, sparking this national outcry, and obviously we've had some issues here in the local community as well too that have kind of exacerbated that issue. But this was a moment in time where our elected officials in our community came together and said, we can do something. We can take this energy and we can do something positive.
So I sat on the table with community engagement, and the one thing that I was really struck by is how authentic the conversations were. Initially, it took a little bit of time to gain some trust between the police and community, but as the time went on, the conversations were very rich. They were sometimes very difficult. But they were very respectful and honest conversations that I think helped frame the issue or the challenge for us very well.
I think the community expectations of law enforcement have changed. I think the community is more interested in understanding the roles and responsibilities of law enforcement officers, as well as expressing an interest in being more involved in the strategies that are implemented within their neighborhoods.
This process was real, that community members were involved in this process. This wasn't just something put together just to appease people. This was something put together to actually create a viable and long-standing change.
The implementation process will involve staff from across the organization, primarily police, but there will be other departmental staff and the city manager staff supporting the implementation. There has been a 16-member committee set up to help provide some oversight with regards to implementation. And those 16 members are community members from each of the 5 working groups, and we'll be implementing recommendations that range in from low to high in complexity. So some of the more complex recommendations will take a little bit more time for us to work through. Some of them involve RFPs and consultants, and others are policy recommendations that, while we can change the policy, will still require training and other aspects that go along with that policy change. And then finally, we'll be evaluating all of this as we go to make sure that the recommendations are having the desired impact and outcome that in the spirit they were made in.
I'm optimistic in the future of policing, especially in the city of Dayton. I believe that this process is bringing the police officers even closer to the community members. And I believe that community engagement is going to continue to be a priority within the city of Dayton, and law enforcement efforts will continue to be more and more focused.
I think when you open up the lines of communication and you allow people to talk about the tough subjects, initially it seems hard, but the more we understand each other, the more we build relationships around diversity and inclusion, the better Dayton will be.
In 10 years, I hope that our policing, first of all, has a lot more resources for partnerships in keeping our community safe. You know, obviously, the ultimate goal in policing is to have a safer community. And we have an opportunity to bring alongside police other resources, other partnerships that can help them do their jobs maybe in a different way, but in a better outcome.
In 5 or 10 years, I see it being changed in a positive way. I hopefully see us less nervous when we get pulled over. It might take longer than 5 years, but at least in 5 years, hopefully some of that changes. Maybe we'll even be more likely to call the police if we have something.
I'm hoping that the relationship between particularly black people in our community and police is stronger, that the trust is built more. I don't think it's going to be perfect, and we're definitely, you know, this is a relationship, and so this work is really just beginning. I'm looking forward to us every single year looking at our numbers and the data to see how we're doing and hold our community accountable. But at the end of the day, I'm hoping for a safer Dayton. All right, next we're going to have the City Manager, Shelley Dickstein, speak.
Thank you, Mayor, and good morning, everyone. So as the video did a great job of showing, this was a really rich and robust engagement process with nearly 100 community members, many staff from all levels in the organization, and police. And probably one of the most robust that I've seen in my 25+ years here at the city. So as the administration takes over the responsibility of implementing these 142 recommendations, it is done with a great degree of seriousness and a great degree of responsibility, knowing that we have to implement the way that the community expects and the way that these recommendations were made in the first place, so that they can have the desired impact and we can continue to build stronger community police relations across the city. As we work towards our implementation of these recommendations, we will be as transparent and communicative as we did the 9 months that we were generating those recommendations. And so here to show how we are, one, communicating very openly with our oversight committee of 16 community members, as well as an outward-facing dashboard for the entire community to understand and get information. I will now invite Paul Saunders from our police department forward. He'll be followed by Richard Bailey and Abby Jones to talk about the dashboard.
Good morning. As the mayor and city manager mentioned, there are 142 recommendations. So the dashboard you're getting ready to see up on the screen, first of all, is a work in progress. As we move forward in implementing these tasks and these recommendations, we are tweaking and getting better and better at how we manage them. It was a big project at first to look at 142. So as Richard goes through, I want to show you, first of all, how the format of this tracker is. The left-hand side are filters, and then the middle shows a short title of each of the 142 recommendations. And on the right-hand side is the actual details of each individual recommendation implementation. So key thing to note is and right where the mouse is right now on the screen, you'll see where it says implementation number. That refers to one of the 142. Right below that, where it says recommendation number, that refers to one of the 5 working groups. Each of those 5 working groups submitted a recommendation to the commission. On that recommendation, there might have been anywhere from 1 to 25 of the implementation recommendations. So for us to manage and be able to track, it was just easier to categorize them by the working group and the number of the memo that came to commission. So if you slide over to the left, Richard, the first thing we did was take our 142 master list of recommendations, and we decided we wanted to be able to sort by the actual working group. So the community engagement, oversight, recruitment, training, use of force. We very quickly saw that that was not going to be adequate enough. So, and the city manager alluded to the complexity issue, and we categorized each of the recommendations as either a low, medium, or high complexity. And those are defined basically like this. If it's a low-hanging fruit, if the police department could do this independently without any other interaction or major spending, it's low. If it requires some funding or possibly another department, that's going to be medium. If it's a significant investment, requires a law change, outside agency, procurement processes, that gets to be more complex. The next rendition, as we figured out that, hey, we got to tweak this so we can manage it better, was developing statuses. And I would tell you that this is a living document. We basically, as we develop, hey, we need to look at these things this way or that way, we add a status or tweak it. Right now, the statuses are completed. We have completed ongoing. That basically means it's a implementation that we've done what we can at this point, but it's going to have ongoing tasks involved. For example, we changed a policy about training the entire department in a certain facet of policing. Well, we've got the policy changed. We've completed that. The training is scheduled, but it hasn't occurred yet. So it's not that nothing's been done. It's just that we can't do anything until maybe the fall when the training occurs. We have in progress, which is kind of a catch-all. There's a delayed ruling for a couple of the statuses or a couple of the recommendations where the commission has, in general, accepted the recommendation, but they need guidance from law, or needs to be some law changes. So they couldn't make a definitive answer on how it would be implemented until they got that guidance. There's a few out there that still aren't started because there's 142 and we're still working through it. Most everything's had some work done on it already. We have the last two, though, are the ones that tend to be, you'll see them change a lot. We first tagged everything as a partner department if it involved somebody other than the police department. As we are developing those implementations and figuring out what's involved with them, they tend to slip into what's called the pending prerequisites. I'll give you a quick example. There's a recommendation on the complaint process that we work closely with mediation. So nearly every one of the recommendations as they relate to the complaint process required us to start working with mediation before we could do anything else. Once that was done, we could probably break that down into 3 or 4 different prerequisites. For example, the independent accountability auditor. There's a series of recommendations that have to be done once we have that position filled. There's a component that has to do with the tracking software. We've been working towards it. We will have that purchased and deployed. Mediation will. But there's a slew of recommendations that come on the tail end of that also. So that is the breakdown. And then the last filter and last rendition, and if you can scroll down a little bit for me, or is that as far as we go, is the recommendation type. And this more has to do with, in dealing with the implementation committee, which is made up of working group members, is how we can approach by category. We found that there were many recommendations that crossed over, right? They might have been recruitment and community engagement. They may have been use of force and policy. So we decided that we would attack this by grouping the recommendations in those kind of lump areas, right? Lump sum areas. And you can filter by every one of these. So if I wanted to see what was in progress and was tied into, we'll say, policy or equipment, or just pick one of them, Richard, I'm good with any of them. You would see that that's the equipment. The only one we have is body-worn camera. And you can see the details on the right-hand side. And that's the tracker. It will change. I have faith in that because it's a living document. But as we move forward, that's how it's going to work. And this is all going to be available through, I'm going to pass this off to Abby Patel-Jones and Richard Bailey because they've worked on the dashboard, the transparency dashboard, and they'll be speaking with that.
All right, so as the city manager mentioned, when the reform process was taking place over the 9 months, the city was also working towards developing a transparency portal that displays data, police-related data. And this transparency portal was a collaboration between multiple individuals from multiple departments within the city organization. The portal includes 5 different areas which displays the police-related data, including reported crime, calls for service, arrest, use of force, and officer-involved shooting. Reported crime, arrest, and use of force data is displayed by demographic and by type. In addition, the use of force data also includes the reason why the force was used. Officer-involved shooting data is displayed by the demographic and the investigative outcome, and calls for service data displays information by dispatched calls through RDC and the self-initiated calls by the officers. The dashboard includes aggregate information to protect the privacy of victims and to protect the identity of uncharged suspects in accordance with the Ohio's public records law. It also prevents disclosure of other protected information such as social security numbers. And for the same reason, when we go through the dashboard, you'll see that the data is not displayed at the address level. When you zoom down to the street level in each of the map that is on each of the dashboard. Also, to maintain the accuracy and integrity of the data, there was an internal data sharing agreement that was developed. The agreement defines the data collection and data tracking process. It also defines the data owners who are responsible for maintaining and updating the data. And based on this agreement, the data is maintained in a data warehouse, which is updated on a daily basis. That being said, I'm going to hand it over to Richard Bailey. He's going to walk us through the dashboards and show us the usability.
Thank you, Abby. I appreciate it. So as of today, the transparency portal is available through the city's website. You can also get to it directly by daytonohio.gov/transparency portal. We intentionally called it the Dayton Transparency Portal, even though the police department data right now is the main theme. This is a work in progress, as Paul alluded to with the reform tracker. We do plan to add to it as time goes on and be more transparent about more of our information and other groupings. But right now, the police information is the theme. So as I scroll down through, you're going to come in contact with those 5 areas that Abby had discussed. And each one of these cards will launch you into a dashboard. I'm going to go ahead and click into the use of force dashboard and bring it up, and I'll spend just a couple of minutes showing you the overall use of this. And we can spend a little time on this one. These same practices will apply to all of them. First thing you're going to see is the individual infographics or the individual areas of the dashboard. Each one of these dashboards is an annual representation of the data, except for the calls for service. There's a lot more information there. We broke it down by month. You can see right away at the top, you can filter it by the year. So in this case, we're giving you 5 years of information, or 4 years and 2021 year to date. And anywhere I click in any one of these areas of the dashboard will affect the other areas. So for example, if I come down to the pie chart where we're showing the demographic by age, and I click on the 26 to 35 year old representation, you can see the bar chart updates, as does the map, as does the indicator count. I could also pick multiple slices of that pie and see also now the 46 to 55-year-olds grouped with that information. And of course, the indicator updated, the bar chart updated, as did the map. A simple click to the outside will set everything back to the way it was. The same would be true if I come and pick a different year. So if I look at 2020's use of force information, you're going to see that I get a full year of data, a lot more dots on the map, and I'll pause just for a second to explain the map. You're going to see that some of the dots on the map are bigger. The color coding represents the legend as it applies to the other infographic area. But the reason that some of the dots are bigger is that you use a point clustering method to say there's more than one dot there. If I click on any one of those larger dots, or the small ones the same, you're going to get some feedback. It says the predominant age range, because that's the dashboard tab that I'm in, for this use of force is 0 to 17 within that grouping. It doesn't mean that all 5 of those points are. It just means that majority of them are that. If I want to get the individual details on those 5 dots there, I can click on the browse features, and now I can see all of the contributing data to that one incident, that one use of force incident as it happened in 2020 at that location. So it's a wealth of information available to you from either the pre-displayed dashboard panels, or if you want to dig a little deeper into the individual dots there and get the full breadth of information that came along with it. The map will also update the other infographics based on zooming. Most of you are familiar with navigating an online map now or a web map. I can use the tools to the right-hand side here to zoom in. As I zoom in, you're going to see that the other panels update along with that. So anything that's not shown on the map is not showing now in the other dashboard panels. And as Abby talked about, as I zoom down to a certain extent, the dots are going to go away altogether. The data is still going to be represented within that area that the map's showing, but the individual dot at that exact location is going to go away from display. And then a click to the home button will bring me back out. All my panels will update and show me all 151 of those. If you focus your attention down to the bottom, we have the different breakdown for the demographic details. We spent a little time on by age, but you can also click on by race, by sex, the reason for the force as it was applied, and then the force type. And I want to talk just for a moment why that number increased when I switched from, let's say, by age to force type. The reason for this, and this is also true in the crime dashboard as well as the arrest dashboard. An individual could have multiple forces applied per that incident. So when we break it down by type, we're showing every individual use of force that was used on that one individual. The one individual represented in the by age, the multiple uses of force, if there were, represented by type. This dashboard looks a little bit different than the others, only because it's broken down by each month within that year range. If I click on 2019, it's going to show you all the months for 2019 where force occurred. If I click on 2021, you're going to see up to this point in 2021. But the same principles apply. If I click on the larger grouping, the physical force type, then the indicator, the count indicator is going to update as well as the map. I'll click to the side of that and I can get out of it, but multiple, I can click on the taser and the physical force, and now the map's going to update as well. And again, as I zoom in on the map, the other items are going to display. Okay? So quick zoom back out. Just the same as when we were on the by age tab, if I click on any one of the dots on the map, it's going to bring up the details for that, and then I can click in and see the individual details for that specific use of force incident as it occurred. Okay? Okay, you know, we did our best to display the information in the way that we thought it was the most useful, but some folks out there want the data. They want to display it themselves. They want to take it into Excel and make their own charts or graphs. For those folks, what we did was add a view download data source into each individual dashboard. And I'll quickly show you that as we click through. But if I click on the view download source data, it's going to take you to the table where the data came from. So all the data used to represent the dashboard is available for download if you would like to have it. So you can display it all here. You can see there's 1,427 records displaying 10 at a time. You can click through each one of those just as you would expect. If you wanted to download it into a spreadsheet, you just click spreadsheet, you're going to download it, it's going to be on your computer, you can do with it as you want. If you wanted to do some pre-filtering before you downloaded it, you could do that as well. Each one of them has the ability to be filtered, and then when that occurs, you would just download the information that you filtered. So it's all available to you, available on your computer. Okay, so I'm going to click back out of the use of force and just spend a couple seconds going through just to show you how each one of them are represented very, very similar. Once you know how to use one, you know how to use all. So this is the reported crimes within the city of Dayton for the year 2021 year to date, but I could also click back and see 2020 and see a full year of crimes. This is all of the information as it's represented within the dashboard. Any filter or any time that we did anything different than that, it's all registered within the About section of each dashboard. So in this case, we're only showing individual crimes. We're not showing crimes against businesses or crimes against society. That is stated here. So anytime we filtered the data for display, we made sure that it was written or stated on the dashboard itself. The same is true with the data not being able to be displayed based on a geographic location. If the data, as it came in through the police system and the mapping system didn't marry up, that data is not represented here. Either it's a misspelled address or a non-standard address. So anytime that data is not represented, we make sure that we state that on here. So I wanted to make that clear. Okay, but the same principles apply here. I have by race, by sex, and by type, and I can also click to the data download section. If I pop back over to the transparency portal and click on calls for service, this is the one that is a little bit different just because of the volume of data that corresponds to it. But so far in May, we have had 5,421 calls for service, and these are just the dispatch calls for service. If you look down to the tabbed items below, we also break that down by officer contributed calls for service. So there's been 511 of those. So a lot of information all available to you within the dashboard. If you wanted to zoom up to a particular area, again, the dashboard panels are going to update based on the map representation. Okay? Go back out, click on arrests. Same is true for this. Should look very familiar to you. All the same rules apply. As I click on the different dashboard panels, the map is going to update accordingly. And then the last stop would be the officer-involved shooting. The only difference between this one and the other, just because there's such a small amount of data, we did give an all years indicator here, whereas the other ones all default to 2021. 2021 we have one dot. So you can still click through the individual years here, but when you first come in, you are focused on all years that are represented within the data. Okay? So I'm going to back out real quick and just show you that although they're pretty straightforward, we did put a how-to guide on here that you can click on. It's a PDF, you can print it, you can download it to your computer, and you can use that to go through and navigate the individual dashboards. Down below, we also have a link to the Dayton survey. Although the Dayton survey is all-inclusive, we did focus just on the justice section of the Dayton survey, so we take you directly to that. There will be an update to this in the coming months to update the information on the Dayton survey. This is from the last time it was taken. If you get down below here, just a couple of areas that keeps you up to date on the city's social media, specifically the police department's Twitter feed. And then some useful links. A lot of these are represented within the police department's pages themselves, but we just give you a reference back to it. And maybe the most important piece of this is the community feedback form. This is a work in progress, and this is our best stab at the first release, right? But based on your feedback, based on your questions, based on your comments or requests, we will update the information that's available. We'll make changes based on your feedback. So please don't be afraid to click those submittals and send them on through. And then last but not least, I can come back up here to the top and go to the documents section, and that data sharing agreement that Abby had spoke about is listed here. This is our way of showing the public that we have said that this is the data that's going to be represented. Here's what's expected. Here's how often it gets updated. And it's more or less an internal contract to say that's the case. So that's available to you. Also, if any changes are made to that, you'll be updated through the portal and be able to see that agreement as it's handled internally. I'll click back over to the transparency portal, and that is it. Thank you.
Thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
So clearly, I think you can see there's been a significant amount of work done by the entire organization already. Not to mention the great work on this effort by the commissioners to get the recommendations going, to continue that work over this past year, and our city staff, particularly Tori Hollingsworth and Will Smith, who's been working on this project. I think they've done a phenomenal job on getting us to this first point. I want to just be clear to tell you all the resources that are online. We went through the portals today. The interviews with participants, we had some of those clipped out in the videos. All of those interviews can be downloaded on the site. There's a narrative that Ellen Belcher has read with reflections from participants that you can use and see infographics on key recommendations, all 142 recommendations as was shown, and we'll continue to add more content based on feedback from the community and ideas from city staff. So, you know, as we reflect on this 1 year of work, I just am very impressed by the whole organization's alignment and work around this, and want to commend the City Commission for sticking with this and being so focused on it as well. We know that we have an opportunity to increase transparency, to make changes to policy, to review and look at how police and community have their relationship together. This was a huge refresh. I want to thank the members of the committees that have done this, the police department, the public defender's office, the leadership of the police department being so willing to step out with us on this. I appreciate that and appreciate your work. And with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Mayor, given the fact that this is a tremendously large site, given the fact that police can handle hundreds of calls each day, has either the police department or the city had to hire additional staff to make this happen? And if not, how have you reconfigured things to make that happen?
I'll let the city manager talk about that.
We did not hire additional staff for this, largely all done internally. I'm sure that along the way we also got consulting from some of our existing technology consultants to help us in formatting, but the lion's share is that internal team that Abby talked about.
Look, and I think what you've seen is the city organization has really plowed into this. They knew that this was important to the community. They've shown that. The police department has shown that, and the city hall has shown that. And you know, that's important to us. It matters.
I had a question about the tracker. I was just wondering, does it show like what percentage of each community is represented? Because you might see 40%, but if they only make 10% of the community, it could show that's when you can see disparities. Like, so if it says like 50% of black people are being forces used on them, but then they're only making up 10% of the community. If you don't see that number, you'll get confused on like what it actually means.
Yeah, I don't think we didn't lie in census data. We didn't say this is statistically significant. You know, I mean, the city of Dayton is about 42% African American. So you can figure that out knowing that, but it's not like it's lied up in census. That's perhaps something we can look at in the future.
Mayor, can you talk about the transparency title itself? Are you concerned that this being too transparent could cost the city money as far as companies, corporations moving into certain areas?
No, I mean, look, I think we recognize, and I think the view of the City Commission is the more transparent you can be with the data you have, the better. And certainly these tools have gotten easier and easier for us to have these data agreements so it can easily be uploaded, right? So, you know, one of the things that I think over the past decade have we seen all the status all of it.
If I may retract the statement, I started off with a question. I need to say good morning to you.
Oh, good morning, Chris. Good morning.
My follow-up question to you, Mayor, is how many other cities that it's known have this kind of a system where they're being totally transparent to the communities?
I really don't know of any. I don't think this wasn't something we went to another city and said, oh, they've done this really well. This was something I have to give city staff and the police department a lot of credit on, right? I think it comes out of the community engagement work, the community working groups and police working groups, because all these questions were asked by citizens, and so then that's like, how do we make sure that this information's out here? So really commend city staff on this work.
My last question, I promise.
No, it's fine.
As Dayton continues to be diverse, Hispanic, Jewish community, as well as the Black community, and however other different titles I left out, are you concerned that they also need to have bilingual officers involved in this transparency as well? In other words, when there's an incident that happens in, say, for instance, the Hispanic community, do we have enough officers who are able to communicate with the situation if needed?
Well, certainly in recruitment, we talked about making sure that the police department looks like our community and is able to service and help our community as much as possible. So in some cases, that means, yeah, speaking second languages, making sure you have access, making understanding, if you don't, how to get help to do that as a police department. So that's important to us.
How important is the community feedback and looking forward to the future? I know that you guys, when you played the video towards the end, everybody kind of discussed, you know, in 5 years, 10 years, what will the community feedback do and what to encourage people to do once they see this later?
Well, certainly we're looking for regular citizen feedback, as you can see from Richard's work on a feedback just for this data. Secondly, we have the implementation team of community members that are making sure that as we move in this first step of implementation, that there's tons of citizen engagement in that work. You know, third, a lot of the recommendations call for yearly report outs to the public, so that will be an opportunity. And then fourth, we actually used to have just 1 or 2 boards that did this work, and a lot of the recommendations were like having a recruitment committee that has community engagement in it, having a, you know, use of force committee, having the citizen appeals board. So, you know, each of them, instead of it's not just being, you have to do all of this work, because really, if you really get down to it, most of the time, the people that see our citizens, and I think Chief Beal has said this, most of the time, when people see the city of Dayton, they see Dayton police. And so making sure that we're constantly having that information and having more citizen engagement in the police department around these really important issues, and then having this information so everybody can see it, we think is really, really important as we get feedback from the community in this relationship. And I'll also, Chief Beal, since, you know, Chief Beal's leaving, we have to keep all of the things he's taught us. You know, it's called public safety for a reason. We have to have the public engaged.
What about people that don't have access to internet as easily? What are some other ways they can learn about what the Dayton portal has to offer, or some of the links?
Certainly, like, we have, you know, brochures. We will be out in the community. This isn't something that we're replacing. You know, police and citizens will be out in the community. We're excited to get out in person so we don't have to be Zooming all the time. So, you know, there will be more citizen engagement in that way and face-to-face. You know, but people also have access. You know, we're always trying to fight for access to broadband in our community. We know that that's an issue, but, you know, going to your public library and checking this out and having access that way can be helpful too.
Does this portal specifically satisfy any of the recommendations for reporting requirements or like transparency? And
I'm sure it does.
More being added to this to kind of, you know, if there's any other recommendations that recommend, you know, that urge the city to have other things kind of be reported.
So I just want to be clear, I don't think the portal was a recommendation that came out of one of the 142. It was really a great work by the city staff to say, okay, how can we get really transparent? But will it be easier to do the yearly use of force report? Absolutely. Will it be easier to pull this data that we call for yearly reports? Yes. But I think it goes way beyond, you know, I think that's the point. I think city staff were like, look, we can really show this data even further than what I think the working groups and even what I think we had in mind. So we think that's really great.
I talked to a Black Newtonian who was on one of these committees, and he said he's worried that it was a waste of time, that it's not going to go any farther than this right here. What's your message to people in the community that are worried about that?
Well, I would say this. We've spent a lot of time on this. I mean, we're in the thousands of hours, both for citizens that decided to take a leap of faith with us on this and staff time. I mean, the amount of staff time spent on this, this is not lip service. We don't spend this kind of time as a community and using our resources as a city without outcomes. This is an outcome-driven city. It always has been since going back to the days of the Dayton City Charter of 1914. It has been about data and been about seeing that data. So you know, we're trying to show, you know, we know folks, we understand the relationship with police and community, and not only in Dayton but across the country, has been difficult, and trust is hard to build. And so what we're trying to do is show rather than tell. And that's what this press conference today is about.
Mayor, with some of the programs that are already, at least to the best of my knowledge, pre-COVID, still exist, like Coffee with a Cop, community policing, bikes.
Yes, yes. All of that. Look, we're excited, just like everybody else, to get out in the community. Probably more than everybody else, right? Because that's kind of the job of mayor and commission, is to convene people, have meetings with people, hug people. This is the stuff we're really excited about, and I know police is excited about this too. This has been an incredibly difficult time, these 15 months, for our staff, for the city as a whole. I mean, it's not as easy to do your job this way. For you all, it's been difficult. So we are just as excited, and I know police is just as excited to be able to do their job in a way that we did before. Okay? All right. Thank you all for your time today.